Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We are holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav. We'll be learning today mostly Daf Lamed Tes Amud Aleph. We do pick up today in the middle of Lamed Ches Amud Beis, about halfway down in the Shulchan Aruch, in middle of the words of the Ramah. We pick up with the word Avol. Avol Mishem Is'aneh. Now just for continuity's sake, the Mechaber had said in Sif Beis, Sif Beis began on the bottom of Lamed Ches Amud Aleph, and the Mechaber had said that somebody who has the custom of fasting during Aseres Yimei Tshuva, so since he does this all the time, he doesn't have to make a kabbalas taanis the day before he begins fasting, and he doesn't have to be mashlim the taanis, he doesn't have to fast all the way through to tzeis hakochavim. He only has to fast until the Zman of Ma'ariv. And I think in the Mishnah Berurah we mentioned maybe even until Mincha Gedolah, if that's his custom to fast only till Mincha Gedolah, he could daven Mincha, say Anenu, and then break his fast. And the Ramah said that the same thing is true of a chassan. A chassan also doesn't require a kabbalas taanis the day before the Yom HaChuppah, because that's an accepted custom that a chassan fasts on the day of the chuppah. Therefore, no kabbalas taanis is required, and he also doesn't have to be mashlim the taanis. He doesn't have to fast all the way through to tzeis hakochavim. He could drink the kais. The Ramah said, "Va'az yuchal lishtais mikais shel bracha." He could drink from the kais shel bracha at the chuppah, even if it's before tzeis hakochavim, as long as he daven mincha beforehand. Now, the rule that we're coming up with over here seems to be that when do you have to be mashlam a taanis? When do you have to fast all the way through to tzeis hakochavim? There seem to be two factors involved. One is this a taanis that requires a kabbalas taanis? If you're going to be makabel the taanis the day before the taanis, then you're going to have to fast all the way through to tzeis hakochavim, because once you make a kabbalas taanis, that is, you're accepting the taanis upon yourself, ketakonas chazal. Chazal were masakin certain taanesim, let's say the four taanis tzibur, right? Asar b'tevis, shiva asar b'tamas, tisha b'av, tzem gedalia. So when the chazal were masakin a taanis, the format of a taanis that chazal were masakin, the taanis fat goes all the way through to tzeis hakochavim. Like we said earlier, we said, Kol taanis shelo yishakal av chama, taanis shelo yishlimu at tzeis hakochavim einay taanis. That's the format of a taanis that chazal were masakin. If you make a kabbalas taanis and you don't make a tanai in your kabbalas taanis, if you make a stam kabbalas taanis, then the default is you are makabel taanis, you are makabel taanis ketakonas chazal. So you have to fast all the way through to tzeis hakochavim. But if it's a taanis that doesn't require you to make a kabbalas taanis, like these fasts that the Mechaber is speaking about, somebody who has the minig always to fast on Aseres Yimei Tshuva, so he doesn't need a kabbalas taanis, because like the Chafetz Chaim said in the Mishnah Berurah, it's mekubal va'omid. There's already a default kabbalas taanis, so he doesn't have to make a specific kabbalas taanis. So then he never made a kabbalas taanis. And factor number two that the Mishnah Berurah has been telling us, the type of taanis that you make when you fast during Aseres Yimei Tshuva, that's not a taanis al she'avar. That's not a taanis where you're mourning over something that happened in the past. Again, the general taanis of takonas chazal are taanesim where it's a taanis of avelus over things that happened in the past. Shiva asar b'tamas, asar b'tevis, tisha b'av, tzem gedalia. So these taanesim, let's say the taanis of Aseres Yimei Tshuva, there's another reason why the default is not that it's like takonas chazal, because it's not the same type of fast. The type of fast when you fast on Aseres Yimei Tshuva, that's what the Mishnah Berurah said is litziyurei ba'alma. You're paining yourself in order to arouse in yourself a feeling of doing tshuva. So that's al ha'osid. You're doing it for the future. You're doing it to bring about tshuva, and you're doing it l'tziyurei ba'alma, to gain yourself schusim. So that's not the same type of taanis. So you have two factors why this taanis is not like the takanas chazal, and therefore the default position is not that it has to be similar to takanas chazal, and therefore you don't have to fast all the way through to tzeis hakochavim. Now, says the Ramah here, again about halfway down on the page, Avol, however, somebody who has the minig, he has the custom that he fasts during the 3 weeks. He fasts between Shiva Asar B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av. Oh, over there, says the Ramah, Tzarich Lahashlim. He has to fast all the way through to Tzeis HaKechavim. Afal Gav De'enoi Tzarich Kabbalah, even though this taanis does not require a kabbalah. Let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut Yud Gimel, Lahashlim. This person has to fast all the way to tzeis hakochavim. Hatam, the reason why now you have to fast through to tzeis hakochavim is Shemisanin al ha'ovar, al ha'churban. Because over here, why are you fasting? If you fast between Shiva Asar B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av. It might be, obviously, part of a taanis always is to humble yourself and to bring about tshuva. That's always the ikar of a taanis. But over here, you're fasting because of something that happened in the past. Shemisan al ha'avar al ha'churban. You're fasting because of a historical occurrence, and you're mourning over the churban. Oh, so that's not that's not just a taanis of l'tzeurei kamachavin. That's very similar to the taanis of Chazal. That's very similar, let's say, to Shiva Asar B'Tammuz or Tasar B'Tevis. You're fasting al ha'avar and you're mourning over the churban. So then you have to go ahead and do a fast kitakanas Chazal, even though you weren't makabel the taanis. Ma'ashein kain ba'aseres yemei tshuva. But this stands in contrast to when you fast during the Aseres Yemei Tshuva, Demisanen ala Osid, where you're fasting for the future, Sheyikara Gzardinam, so that your Gzardin, so that any evil decree that was written about you in Shemayim should be torn up and you should be inspired for Tshuva. Arino Doloikiblo Litziyure. So over there, the default position is not that taanis is like Takanas Chazal. That taanis is Litziyure Ba'alma. And this is also the reason that those people who have the minhag to fast during the 40 days before Yom Kippur, they also don't have to fast until tzeis hakochavim. That's also a fast for tshuva, not al ha'osid, not mourning over the past. I've cut you a daled, and this is true even though this fast that the person is fasting from Shiva Asar B'Tammuz until Tisha B'Av, afal gav de'enoi tzarich kabbalah, even though you don't need a kabbalas taanis, demekubel va'omer b'pnei sheragol bazeh b'chol shana. You don't need a kabbalas taanis for these tanesim between Shiva Asar B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av, if you're somebody who has that minhag to do it every year, because it's mekubel va'omer. Since you do it all the time, you don't need a kabbalah. It's the default is that you're going to fast. So even though you don't need a kabbalas taanis, so that factor isn't going to require you to be mashlim the taanis until tzeis hakochavim, but you still have the other factor, that it's a taanis al ha'avar, it's a taanis in mourning over what happened in the past, and therefore it's similar to the taanis that's kitakanas chazal, and therefore you have to hold the taanis all the way through to tzeis hakochavim. Continues the Ramah, middle of the second to last line. V'chein, similarly, mi she'enoi misane kol aseres yemei tshuva. Let's say somebody is not accustomed to always fasting during aseres yemei tshuva. Rak misane yoim yomayim. Every now and then, during Aseres Yemei Tshuva, he'll fast 1 or 2 days during Aseres Yemei Tshuva. This year, during Aseres Yemei Tshuva, he was inspired one day during Aseres Yemei Tshuva. It was a hard year. He feels he needs a little extra inspiration, a little extra push for Tshuva, a little extra schusim before Yom Adin. So he decided, I'm fasting during the 3rd day of Aseres Yemei Tshuva. Well, that would be some Gedalia. I'm fasting the 5th day of Aseres Yemei Tshuva. So he's going to fast 1 day during Aseres Yemei Tshuva, Tshuva, but he's not even in the habit of doing this every year. In that case, the Rama says, boy Kabbalah, now he's going to need a kabbalas taanis because it's not mekubal va'imid. He doesn't do this every year. So if he doesn't do it every year, it's not mekubal va'imid. In order to make it a taanis, he needs a kabbalas taanis, like we're going to see later in today's shir. In order to make a taanis a valid taanis, you need a kabbalas taanis, unless it's mekubal va'imid. But over here, it's not mekubal va'imid because he doesn't do it every year. So he's going to need a kabbalas taanis. And since he needs a kabbalas taanis, he also needs v'hashlama. He's going to have to fast until tzeis hakochavim because he went ahead and he made a kabbalas taanis. A default kabbalas taanis is a kabbalas taanis kitakanas chazal. If you accept a taanis, then the default position is that you're going to make that taanis kitakanas chazal, which means all the way through to tzeis hakochavim. But, says the Ramah, v'nirali, it appears to me, the dafka bistam. That's only if when he's mekabel the taanis, he does a stam kabbalas taanis. He says, Harei ani mekabel taanis. I'm going ahead. What's the lashon that we're going to have later? The lashon is, Hareini b'taanis yachid machar. I am accepting upon myself a taanis yachid tomorrow. Now, he didn't specify any details of the taanis yachid. So then it's a stam taanis. It's a default taanis. A stam taanis is a taanis kitakanas chazal, which means all the way through to tzeis hakochavim. That's why the Ramah says here, v'nirali the dafka b'stam. This is only true that he has to fast till tzeis hakochavim if he makes a stam kabbalas taanis. Aval im hisne shaloi hishlim. If he wants to make a kabbalas taanis and he wants to say, I'm being mekabel taanis tomorrow, a taanis only until mincha gedola, okay, harishus biyadai. He has permission to do that. He can do that. To learn adif mishar taanis. It's no different than any other time that a yachid can be makabel a taanis on himself for only a partial day taanis. No problem. You're allowed to do that. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Ois Katan Tezvav, this person who's not in the habit of fasting all the time during Aseres Yimei Tshuva, and now he decided 1 or 2 days this year during Aseres Yimei Tshuva he wants to fast. Rak misani yoyma yoymayim. Myri was speaking here, this is a person who's not in the habit of fasting every year during Aseres Yimei Tshuva. You see, the lashon of the Ramah is not 100% clear. What the Ramah says is, V'chein similarly, mi she'enoi mis'aneh kol Aseres Yimei Tshuva. Somebody who doesn't fast all Aseres Yimei Tshuva. Rak mis'aneh yoyma yoymayim. He only fasts 1 or 2 days. Now, how do you understand that? You might understand that by saying that this is a person who doesn't fast for all of the days of Aseres Yimei Tshuva. He only fasts for 2 days of Aseres Yimei Tshuva. But he fasts for 2 days of Aseres Yimei Tshuva every year. Says the HaTorah, no, that's not the person that we're talking about. That person would not need a kabbalas taanis. If somebody has the minhag that he fasts every year, the 4th and the 5th day of Aseres Yimei Tshuva, then he doesn't need a kabbalas taanis. It's mekubal va'imid. He does it every year. And since he doesn't need a kabbalas taanis, and since this taanis is only l'tziyurei ba'alma l'tshuva, he wouldn't need to be mashlim. He would not need to fast all the way to tzeis hakochavim. So that's why the Chavetz says, what case is the Ramah speaking about? Myri, the Ramah is discussing b'mi she'enoi noyeg lehisanis kol shana. Over here we're talking about somebody who's not in the habit of fasting during Aseres Yimei Tshuva at all every year. It's just this year he decided he wants to fast 2 days during Aseres Yimei Tshuva. That's why he needs a kabbalas taanis. Vim kain, since it's not mekubal va'imid because he doesn't do it every year, tzarich lekabel taanis. That's why this gentleman needs a kabbalas taanis. Lochein, and since he needs a kabbalas taanis, therefore tzarich lahashlim. He has to be mashlim in the taanis, and he has to fast all the way through to tzeis hakochavim because he made a stam kabbalas taanis. But somebody who's in the habit of fasting during Aseres Yimei Tshuva every year, even if it's only 1 day during Aseres Yimei Tshuva that he fasts every day of the year, that person does not need a kabbalas taanis because he does it every year. It's mekubal va'imid. And since he doesn't need a kabbalas taanis, he also doesn't need to be mashlim. He doesn't have to fast all the way through to tzeis hakochavim. Ubikolshkein, certainly, Misha Masne B'Shas Kabbalah, Shebevadayin Tzarech Hashlama. And certainly somebody who makes a Tanai, somebody who makes his kabbalas taanis conditional, and he says, I'm being makabel taanis, but only for a partial day taanis, certainly he doesn't need to be mashlim. Ois cotton tezayin, hisna, if he makes it conditional, b'shas kabbalas taanis, if when he's makabel the taanis, he says clearly, I'm only being makabel a partial day taanis, he doesn't have to be mashlim. The Efsher in the Chavetz says it's possible to hu adinim hisna mikaidim, even if he didn't make the condition at the time that he made the verbal kabbalas taanis. When he made the verbal kabbalas taanis, all he did was he said, Hareini b'taanis lamachar. Tomorrow I'm fasting. But before he made the verbal kabbalas taanis, let's say the day before, he said, you know what? Tomorrow I'm going to be makabel taanis for the following day. When I make that kabbalas taanis, I really only want it to be a partial day. I only want to fast until mincha gedolah. But then when he does the actual verbal statement, he just says, Hareini b'taanis lamachar. Says the Chavetz Chaim, after it's possible to hu adin that the same halacha would apply if he made the condition before he made the actual verbal kabbalas taanis. Arinon, we still say the kabbalah shekibal achakach, that the verbal commitment that he makes later on, adaita de tanah kama heavy. It was made having in mind his original tanai. So on Tuesday, he said, tomorrow, Wednesday, I'm going to be makabel taanis for Thursday. When I make that kabbalas taanis, I want it to be only a partial day taanis until mincha gedolah. Then on Wednesday, he says, Hareini b'taanis lamachar. The Chavetz Chaim is bringing down over here from the Prima Gadim that and others that it could be that we say that Wednesday's kabbalas taanis was made al das Tuesday's tanai, that it should only be a partial day taanis. Now we go to Siv Gimel, top of Lamed Tes Amud Aleph. Yachid shekibel alav taanis stam be'erev Shabbos. Let's say on Thursday, because we're going to see later on that the kabbalas taanis is always the day before. So on Thursday, somebody was makabel on himself a stam taanis for Friday, for erev Shabbos. So on Thursday, by mincha, somebody said, Hareini b'taanis yachid lamachar. Tomorrow I'm undertaking upon myself a taanis yachid. Okay, does he have to fast all the way to tzeis hakochavim? Says the mechaber, tzarich lehisanois ad tzeis hakochavim. He's mechuyev to fast all the way to tzeis hakochavim. Im loy shepiresh b'shas kabbalas taanis ad sheyashlimu atzibur tfilasam. Unless when he made the kabbalas taanis, he clearly stated that I'm only being makabel the taanis until the tzibur finishes davening. If he said, I'm only being makabel taanis until the time that the tzibur finishes davening. Okay, let's say he did this during the summer when a lot of people are in the custom of making Shabbos early. What does that mean, making Shabbos early? That means we know that we have the shita of Rabbi Yehuda and Mesechus Brachas that you're allowed to daven Ma'ariv after Plaga Mincha. Plaga Mincha is an hour and 15 minutes before Shkia. So somebody daven Mincha before Plaga Mincha, and after Mincha he davens Kabbalah Shabbos, and now after Plag he davens Ma'ariv. So it's not even Shkia yet. Forget tzeis hakochavim, it's not even Shkia. But for him it's Shabbos already. So let's say on Thursday, a person made a kabbalas taanis, and he said, I'm being makabel a taanis yachid tomorrow on erev Shabbos, but I'm ending the taanis when the tzibur finishes davening, and he's going to make Shabbos early. So then, when he makes Shabbos early, his taanis is over, and he could break his taanis even though it's not tzeis hakochavim yet, and it's a valid taanis, and he was makayim his chiyuv to have a taanis. But if he didn't do that, the mechaber says, if instead he was just makabel taanis stam, he just said on Thursday, Hareini b'taanis yachid lamachar, I'm accepting upon myself a taanis yachid tomorrow on erev Shabbos, then the mechaber says he has to fast all the way to tzeis hakochavim. And the Ramah ends off here in the parentheses, Va'ayin le'el siman reish mem tes, and take a look at what we wrote back in Hilchos Shabbos in siman reish mem tes. Okay, let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah is cotton yud zayin. Shekibel alav taanis stam. Somebody accepted upon himself a stam taanis on erev Shabbos. What does this mean, a stam taanis? Hainu, this means shaloi pireish be'eis hakabbalah as kavanosai. At the time that he made the verbal commitment to have a taanis, he didn't give the details. He didn't say what kind of taanis. Amrinan, in that case we say, the mistama haya kavanasai kamoi b'shar yemoi sachoil. Minastam, again, the default position is you make a kabbalas taanis. It's a regular kabbalas taanis. The same way if you made a kabbalas taanis on Tuesday for Wednesday, it means a regular taanis kitakonas chazal through to tzeis hakochavim. The dinah hu at tzeis hakochavim calls man shalei piresh. The default kabbalas taanis always means a kabbalas taanis until tzeis hakochavim, unless you state otherwise. And even though it's Erev Shabbos, there's no problem with fasting until tzeis hakochavim. There's no prohibition, there's no isser to come into Shabbos while you're fasting. There's a prohibition to fast on Shabbos. But it's not that I'm making a taanis on Shabbos. I was fasting on Friday. So I came into Shabbos while I was fasting. So okay, you made a stam kabbalas taanis. That means until tzeis hakochavim. You can't eat until tzeis hakochavim. Ois cotton yud ches in the Mishnah Berurah. Im loy shepiresh ad sheyishlimu atzir tfilasam. Unless the person stated clearly that he's only being makabel the taanis until the tzibur finishes their davening. V'hu adin debahani kishemaste sheyisane rak ad zman mincha gedola. Or maybe he made a kabbalas taanis on Thursday and he said hareini b'taanis yachad lemachar until mincha gedola. So okay, so he accepted upon himself clearly a partial day taanis until mincha gedola. He could do that. Or mikri taanis, it's called a taanis like we learned earlier. V'yachal lehispal anenu, and the yachid is even allowed to say anenu in his Shemon Esrei in the bracha of Shemei Tefillah, like we said in Sif Aleph in the Ramah. This was the opinion of the Miksas Rabbavasa. You want to be makabel a partial day taanis? You could. You're makabel a taanis until mincha gedola. You don't eat until after mincha, and by mincha you say anenu in Shemei Tefillah because you're not adding in a new bracha Shemon Esrei anyway, and you're always allowed to add in a tefillah in Shemei Tefillah. So no problem. And the Ramah said you could even say b'yom tzayim tani seinu according to some. Right? The Taz said you shouldn't say b'yom tzayim tani seinu, but the Big Day Yesha said you're allowed to, because since it's at least until tzeis, it's considered a taanis. So that's the Mishnah Berurah over here. That's why the Mishnah Berurah says not a problem. Now, ois cotton yud tes v'ayin le'el siman reish mem tes. He points us back to siman reish mem tes. Hainu ma shehechriya sham b'hagal ledina. He sends us back to Chavetz Chaim, to Siman Reish Mem Tes. Really, the Ramah himself sent us back to go look at Hilchos Shabbos and see what the halacha l'maisa is. V'ayin sham, and the Chavetz Chaim says, and take a look back at Reish Mem Tes. Masha kasafti sham b'Mishnah Berurah bir halacha, what I wrote in the Mishnah Berurah and in the bir halacha, says the Chavetz Chaim. What does the Ramah say back at Reish Mem Tes? The Ramah says in Reish Mem Tes that the halacha is not this way. The Ramah says, when you have a taanis tzibur on Erev Shabbos, so let's say we know Asar B'Tevis could fall out on Erev Shabbos. I believe it did this past year. If you have a taanis tzibur on Erev Shabbos, then you have to fast all the way to tzeis hakochavim. It's a taanis tzibur. It's a regular taanis kitakonas chazal. It's mekubel va'omid. We don't make a special kabbalas taanis the day before, but it's mekubel va'omid because it's a regularly scheduled one of the taanis tzibur that's on our calendar. It's mekubel va'omid al das chazal. So we don't need a kabbalas taanis. It's a regular taanis tzibur. You have to fast all the way to tzeis hakochavim. But a taanis yachid, says the Rama in Reish Mem Tes, a taanis yachid, even if the fellow was made a kabbalas taanis and he made a stam kabbalas taanis, where the Mechaber says over here that he has to fast until tzeis hakochavim, the Ramah in Reish Mem Tes says no. He should only fast until after the tzibur finishes their davening. Why is that? Because once the tzibur is mekabel Shabbos, like the scenario I gave you, where people are making Shabbos early, once the tzibur was mekabel Shabbos, that means now it's Shabbos. It's no longer Erev Shabbos, it's Shabbos. If it's already Shabbos and it's no longer Erev Shabbos, that means that you were mashlim your taanis. Why do we say that you have to fast all the way through to tzeis hakochavim? Because you have to fast the whole day. And that means all the way through to tzeis hakochavim. But over here on Erev Shabbos, if the tzibur was already makabel Shabbos, that means that the day of Erev Shabbos is already over. So if you fasted all the way through to when the tzibur was makabel Shabbos, aka when they left when the tzibur finished their davening. So okay, so you did fast the entire day, and that's called you were mashlim your taanis. That's the hachra of the Ramah. The Ramah in Reish Mem Tes says even the yachid with a stam kabbalas taanis only fasts until the tzibur finishes their davening. The Mishnah Berurah adds on over there that there is one difference, and that is there's one case where it's different. Let's say somebody has been in the habit of doing this already other times. There are other times that he was makabel taanis yachid on Erev Shabbos. And the first time he was makabel taanis on Erev Shabbos, he fasted all the way to tzeis hakochavim. Then the next time he does it, if he makes a stam kabbalas taanis, he has to fast all the way till tzeis hakochavim. Because now we see that his stam das, his default kabbalah, is to fast until tzeis hakochavim, even on Erev Shabbos, because that's what he's done previously, unless he clearly states that he only wants to fast until the tzibur finishes davening. Okay. Now we go to Siv Daled. Says the Mechaber, taanis chaloim. If somebody is making a taanis chaloim, what's a taanis chaloim? Somebody had a very troubling dream, and it bothers him to the extent that he doesn't have the ability to say to himself, it's a dream. A dream is dvarim b'telim. I don't have to worry about it. No, it's mamish just gate them on, and he can't get rid of it. It's really troubling him. So he wants to make a fast day in order to be mevatel the chaloim, to nullify the chaloim. Now the halacha is that taanis chaloim, you're even allowed to fast on Shabbos itself. So taanis chaloim, says the Mechaber, tzarich lehisanis at tzeis hakochavim. A taanis chaloim is always until tzeis hakochavim, like every other taanis. Va'afilu be'erev Shabbos. And even if somebody's making a taanis chaloim on Erev Shabbos, he has to fast all the way to tzeis hakochavim. V'ayin la'el simin Reish Mem Tes Siv Daled. Says the Mishnah Berurah Chaf. Va'afilu be'erev Shabbos. Says the Chavetz Chaim, why not? To hamisanin avurah af b'Shabbos. A taanis chaloim, you're even allowed to fast on Shabbos. So certainly you could fast on Erev Shabbos. Now we go to Sif Hey. Kol taanis shaloi kibloi alav hayachid miba'od yom. Any taanis where it's a taanis yachid, an individual wants to fast, but he didn't make a kabbalas taanis the previous day. So says the Mechaber, Kol taanis shaloi kibloi alav hayachid miba'od yom. Any individual taanis where the individual wasn't makabel taanis the day before, einoi taanis, it's not a valid taanis. Hago, the Ramah says, what does this mean? It's not a valid taanis. Lehispalel anenu, it's not a taanis to the extent that you're not going to say anenu. Veloi, and the wording over here is very trickery. So listen to the way I explain it. Veloi, and it's also not a taanis. Le'inyan im chayiv taanis stam, if this person was obligated to have a taanis. Let's say somebody took upon himself a neder. He said, I'm going to fast one day. He didn't specify which day. So now he has a neder that he has to be makayim. He has an obligation to fast one day. So now he decided, okay, Tuesday, I'm going to fast Tuesday. But on Monday, he wasn't makabel taanis. He neglected to be makabel taanis on Monday. So says the Ramah, if you weren't makabel taanis, it's not a taanis lehispal anenu. It's not a taanis, and you don't say anenu. V'loyin, it's also not a taanis le'inyanim chayiv taanis stam. If you're obligated to fast a fast day, v'hisanekach, and now you fast without a kabbalas taanis the day before, lo yotzi yidei nidroi. You weren't makayim your neder, and you're going to have to fast another day. Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah Chaf Aleph, shaloi kibloi alav hayachid. If it's an individual's taanis, a voluntary taanis, and he wasn't makabel taanis, la'afuke, when the Mechaber uses these words, shaloi kibloi alav hayachid, we're talking about a taanis that an individual wasn't makabel on himself, la'afuke taanis tzibur. The Mechaber wants to contrast this to a regular taanis tzibur. Deina tzarich kabbalah, shivas b'tamas doesn't need a kabbalas taanis the day before. Tisha B'av doesn't need a kabbalas taanis the day before. Kamavur b'sif yud beis, like we're going to see later in this Siman in Sif Yud Beis. If you didn't make a kabbalas taanis while it was still day the day before, it's not a taanis in the context of the halacha of saying Anenu, so you're not going to recite Anenu. Says the Chavetz Chaim, mashma, the implication of the words of the Ramah here and the Mechaber is, the Mechaber says, if you weren't Mekabel the taanis mi ba'oid yoim. So the Mechaber seems to say clearly, you have to accept the taanis upon yourself while it is still day, the day before the taanis. So the implication is, if you forgot to be Mekabel taanis by mincha, but at 10 o'clock at night, you remembered to be Mekabel taanis. Now let's remember, technically speaking, right? Not technically, practically speaking, your taanis really isn't starting until the next morning, right? A regular taanis, you start fasting in the morning, right? People wake up early in the morning to drink a coffee. So practically speaking, you're still allowed to eat now, 10 o'clock at night. But the implication of the Mechaber is, you forgot to be Mekabel the taanis by mincha, you remembered to be Mekabel the taanis at 10 o'clock at night, that's still loy mahani. That acceptance, that kabbalas taanis that you make 10 o'clock at night is not efficacious. That's not a kabbalas taanis. And tomorrow you're not going to be able to say Anenu. And even if you fast tomorrow, which we're going to see, could be you do have to fast, but even if you fast tomorrow, you weren't mekayim your neder if you owe a taanis by fasting that day, because you don't have an effective kabbalas taanis. And this that we're going to say later on in this Siman in Sif Yud, B'dea Kamaisa, according to the first opinion, that a person could have a kabbalas taanis later on during the day for a taanis shoyis, and then he could daven anenu. What is this talking about? What's a taanis shoyis? A taanis shoyis means literally a taanis for a short amount of time, a taanis for several hours. The scenario that's discussed later on in Sif Yud is as follows. Somebody did not have in mind to make a taanis today. But what happened? He got up early, he went to shul, he davened, he ran home, he saw he was late, he didn't have time to have his coffee, he ran to work, he got very busy at work, he had a crazy morning, meetings, phone calls, everything else. Before you know it, it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's during the winter, so the day is very short. Shkia is 4:45. He looks at his clock. He sees it's 2:30. He says, you know what? I haven't eaten anything all day. I might as well make a taanis out of it. I'm being Mekabel taanis now. Okay? He's being Mekabel taanis 2 o'clock in the afternoon that he's not going to eat from now until tzeis hakochavim, and tzeis hakochavim is 5:45. So, okay, how many hours are left to his fast? Not many. That's why he decided he's going to fast. Because, hey, most of the day is gone anyway. I might as well fast. According to the first opinion in Sif Yud, later on in this Siman, that's a valid kabbalas taanis. Now, wait a second. You're telling me that I can make a kabbalas taanis 2 o'clock in the afternoon on the day that I'm fasting, and that is a valid kabbalas taanis. But over here, if I want to fast on Tuesday, and I made a kabbalas taanis 10 o'clock at night, Monday night, it's not a valid kabbalas taanis. How do you reconcile those two halachas? Doesn't seem to make sense. That's what the Chavetz Chaim is trying to reconcile over here. So again, let me read it inside. The Chavetz Chaim says like this. This that we explain later on in Sif Yud B'dea Kamaisa, according to the first opinion in Sif Yud, that a kabbalas taanis is effective later on in the afternoon of the day that you're actually fasting. And if you daven mincha after that kabbalas taanis, you're going to say anenu. So again, you decided on Tuesday afternoon that you're making a fast day out of Tuesday. And it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and you're going to a 2:30 mincha. So at 2 o'clock you decided you're Mekabel taanis. At 2:30 you could daven mincha and you could say anenu. You didn't make a kabbalas taanis the day before. Hacha, over here explains the Chavetz Chaim, where you want to fast on Tuesday, but you made a kabbalas taanis 10 o'clock Monday night, and we're saying that's not effective. You know why? Because kevon shehischel his anois l'shem chayva v'achar kach kiblai lo yehavi kabbalah klal. Let me explain this to you outside. See, here's the difference. So there's one thing that you have to understand. Even though when a yachid makes a taanis, right, or even most of our taanis tziburs, Asar B'Tevis. If I ask you, when does the fast of Asar B'Tevis start? You're going to look at the Luach. You're going to see what time Alois HaShachar is. Let's say Asar B'Tevis is on Monday. So you're going to look at the Luach. You're going to see what time Alois is. And you're going to say, okay, that's when the taanis starts. You're going to tell me that the taanis doesn't start at night. The taanis starts in the morning. Tisha B'Av starts at night. Yom Kippur starts at night. But Shiva Asar B'Tavis starts in the morning. Asar B'Tevis starts in the morning. Taanis Esther starts in the morning. So Gedai starts in the morning. Not true. Not true. Technically, the taanis begins the night before. The halacha is, even though the taanis starts the night before, you're allowed to eat until the morning. That's why you should know, and many people don't know this halacha. If you want to get up in the morning before the taanis starts and you want to eat, you have to have das before you go to sleep. You have to have intent before you go to sleep that I'm not taking on the taanis until tomorrow morning. If you don't have das not to take on the taanis until tomorrow morning, you're not allowed to get up early and eat. So technically speaking, and you could see this in Sharatzia and Ois Cotton Yud Tes. In Sharatzia and Ois Cotton Yud Tes, the HaTorah says, "Da taanis mikri mishachashecha." We know that in halacha, the day always begins the night before. So the fast of Asar B'Tevis technically begins the night before. The fast of Shiva Asar B'Tavis technically starts the night before. The taanis mikri mishachashecha. It's called the taanis already from the night before. Afal pisha mutar lechel balayla. Even though you're allowed to eat during the night. Kemavur b'paiskim, as is clear in the paiskim. So you see, here's the thing. If somebody is makabel taanis, on Monday somebody wants to be makabel taanis for Tuesday. The halacha is, if you don't make the kabbalas taanis, has to be during the day before. Like we're going to see in Sivav tomorrow's shir, you're supposed to be makabel taanis mincha the day before. You have to be makabel the taanis before you begin the taanis l'shem taanis. So you have to be makabel the taanis by mincha the day before. Now, you want to fast on Tuesday, but you forgot to be makabel taanis. Now it's 10 o'clock Monday night. You want to be makabel the taanis now. That's not effective. You know why? Because you already started the taanis. And you started the taanis without a kabbalah. So the kabbalah that you make now is not an effective kabbalah. Because you started it after the beginning of the taanis. Because the taanis starts already at night, technically speaking. And you had in mind that you wanted to fast on Monday. So you want Monday to be a fast? You want Tuesday to be a fast? That means that the fast starts Monday night. And you neglected to make a kabbalah. You want to make a kabbalah 10 o'clock at night? Too late. You already started the fast. The fast started at tzeis hakochavim Monday night. That's when the fast started, even though you were still allowed to eat. Now let's contrast this to the halacha that we're going to have in Sif Yud of the taanis shois. By the taanis shois, you didn't start Tuesday intending to fast. You decided 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Tuesday, it's already 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I didn't eat anything, it might as well be a taanis. So you didn't start the taanis without a kabbalah. All of the non-eating that you did until now, until 2 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon, wasn't l'shem taanis. And since it wasn't l'shem taanis, you didn't need a kabbalah. Now that you want to start not eating for the rest of the day l'shem taanis, you need a kabbalah. And you made a kabbalah. So you're making the kabbalah before you stop eating l'shem taanis. That's the difference between the two cases. In our case, you didn't have a kabbalah before you started the fast l'shem taanis. In the case of Sif Yud, you have a kabbalah before you stopped eating l'shem taanis. And that's why over there it's effective. Hacha, kevin shehiskel hisanis l'shem chayva v'achakach kibloi, lay have a kabbalah klal. Now, finally, at the end of this Mishnah Berurah, Ois Cotton Chav Beis, the Mishnah Berurah explains to us what the point of kabbalas taanis is. Why do you need a kabbalas taanis? Shenemar, because the pasuk says in Sefer Yoel, Kadchu Tzoim. You need to be mekadesh a fast day. Mashma de be'inon hazmana mikaydem. A fast needs hazmana. It needs preparation beforehand. Dirshu footnote number 31. V'hoisef betam zeh halavush The Levush adds on another explanation why you need kabbalas taanis. Taanis daima lekarbon. A taanis is similar to a carbon. Sheba makriv ha'adam es chelbay v'damay. When a person fasts, he's sacrificing his fats and his blood. We know before you give a carbon, you have to be magdish to behema. And somebody who shechs his carbon, but he doesn't do it l'shem kachim, he's misasek, he's distracted when he does it, it's not a kosher carbon. If you fast and you're misasek, you're not paying any attention to it, that's not a taanis. Ubishem haleshem, in the name of the leshem, muva, it's brought down. Sheyesoid kabbalas taanis, the concept of kabbalas taanis who is shemizamen atzma lekach. He prepares himself for the taanis. U'kamay kol davar shebekdusha shetzarich hazmana. You need hazmana for a davar shebekdusha. You need preparation. Shebekach mamshich u'moyrid oisa ha'kedusha. You need to bring the kedusha down min hashamayim. Vezeh tam hazimun leberkas hamazayin. This is why we have zimun. Berchas hazimun, by benching vezet tam amiras nekadesh kaidem kedusha. Before kedusha, we say nekadesh shemcha ba'olam. It's like a preparation. We want to be mekadesh shem shamayim. All right, I hoped to get a little bit further, but it's already long, so we're going to stop over here. We'll pick up Mirz Hashem next time with this Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Chav Gimel. But we are slowly but surely catching up. We're at least on the right page. I'm not worried. We will, Mirz Hashem, catch up. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schus of limud HaTorah should be megan against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbe should send Yeshua's refuahs and parnasa to all those in need, and we should be zeicher to see the bias goyel tzedek b'meher of Yomeinu. Amen.